Listen to the wind. It is the same wind that whipped off the grey, gull-haunted sea of my childhood, carrying with it the salt of beginnings and the dark, damp earth of inevitable ends. I am Dylan, though the name matters less than the breath that shapes it. You have come here to understand the architecture of a poem, the mechanics of the soul. But I must tell you that poetry is not built. It is bled. It is excavated from the marrow. To understand the fire, you must first understand the hearth where the spark was struck. I was born in Swansea, an ugly, lovely town sprawling by a long and splendid curving shore. It was a place of steep streets, of smoking chimneys, of chapels that smelled of cold stone, and fervent, terrifying prayers. But for me, it was a kingdom of sensory absolute. In the sprawl of Cwmdonkin Park, among the hunchback trees and the bell-tongued swans, I did not just observe the world, I devoured it. I was a boy who listened to the ticking of the blood and the shifting of the tides, feeling intimately that the pulse of the sea and the pulse of my own fragile wrist were driven by the exact same engine. The sparking of my literary soul did not come from a quiet, academic contemplation of literature. It came from the intoxicating, physical weight of words themselves. Before I knew what words meant, I knew how they sounded. I knew how they tasted on the tongue. I heard the rolling, thundering syllables of the Old Testament read aloud, the incantatory rhythms of nursery rhymes, the rough musical cadence of the Welsh voices in the street. Words were not mere vehicles for conveying information. They were spells. They were tangible things like smooth stones picked up from the beach, or glass beads, or drops of blood. I would roll them around in my mouth, feeling their edges, their vowels echoing like bells in a drowned city. I realised that if you placed the right word next to another, a sudden violent magic occurred. A friction was born. A light was struck in the dark. That was my awakening. I did not want to write about the world. I wanted to build a new world out of the syllables themselves, to sing the flesh back onto the bones of the dead. And from this obsession with the alchemy of language grew the very hook of my philosophy, a philosophy not of the mind, but of the soil and the stars. I saw, with a terrifying clarity that has never left me, that creation and destruction are the exact same force. The force that through the green fuse drives the flower drives my green age. That same wind that brings the rain to nourish the roots is the wind that will eventually scatter the dust of our bones. We are inextricably bound to the earth, trapped in the beautiful, agonizing machinery of time. Time holds us green and dying, even as we sing in our chains like the sea. My philosophy is a profound and desperate rebellion against the silence. It is the recognition of our brief, blazing mortality, and the absolute necessity to rage against the dying of the light. We are born dying, yes, but while we have breath, we must make a noise. We must craft a defiant, roaring beauty out of our own decay. We must love the world so fiercely and articulate that love with such thunderous precision that even death is forced to pause and listen to the song. Listen to me, you who sit in the quiet comfort of this room, seeking the romantic secrets of the poet's craft. You look at me and you see the myth, the roaring Welshman, the booming voice echoing from the bottom of a glass, the wild boy of Swansea who drank his own life away. But I tell you now, the creation of beauty is not born from a gentle muse descending upon a sunlit desk. It is dragged, kicking and screaming from the darkest, most humiliating trenches of human endurance. If we are to speak of my struggles, we must strip away the romance. We must speak of the sheer, grinding terror of poverty. It is a cold and unpoetic beast, poverty. It does not inspire, it suffocates. For years my greatest rejection was not from the critics, though they had their knives sharpened for the undisciplined Celt, but from the very world of commerce and survival. I was reduced to a beggar of shillings, writing desperate, pleading letters to patrons and friends, trading my dignity for the price of bread and coal. You cannot know the agony of holding the universe in your mind, of hearing the music of the spheres crashing in your ears, while your children shiver in a damp, draughty house in Lotharn. The world demands a pound of flesh for the privilege of singing, and I paid it daily, carving my verses out of my own marrow, while the bailiffs knocked at the door. But the poverty of the purse was nothing compared to the turmoil of the age. I ask you to imagine the sky tearing open, not with the breath of God, but with the mechanical roar of bombers. The Second World War was not a distant political concept to me. It was the fiery destruction of my youth. I walked through the smoking, shattered ruins of Swansea, my ugly, lovely town, after the 3 nights of the Blitz. I saw the places of my childhood, the streets where I first learned the taste of the wind and the shape of the sea, reduced to ash and broken masonry, to witness the indiscriminate slaughter of the innocent, to see the very earth scarred by the machinery of men, forces a poet to confront the absolute fragility of existence. How do you write a lyric when the world is burning? You write it because the fire demands an answer. You write to defy the ash. The turmoil of the war forged a desperation in my syllables. I realised that death was not a distant rumour, but a constant hovering shadow, and every poem became a frantic, holy rebellion against the dying of the light. And then there is the internal ruin, the struggle that I built with my own 2 hands, the tavern, the bottle. The critics call me a drunkard, a squanderer of gifts, and perhaps they were right in their cold, clinical way. But they did not understand the terror of the blank page. They did not understand that to wrestle with language, to try and capture the beating, bleeding heart of the world in a net of frail words, is an agonising endeavour. The alcohol was not a celebration. It was an anaesthetic. It was a place to hide from the overwhelming, deafening roar of my own mind, from the crushing weight of my own failures, and the relentless march of time. I was rejected by the rigid, academic Puritans of literature, who wanted poetry to be a polite parlour trick, a neat little puzzle of intellect. I gave them blood and bone, sea and soil, the raw, unwashed truth of human mortality, and they recoiled. They wanted the intellect. I gave them the visceral, singing flesh. My life was a constant war between the eternal and the mundane, between the soaring flight of the imagination and the heavy, dragging anchor of my own human weakness. The struggle was not an obstacle to my art, it was the very forge in which the art was hammered into existence. The rejections, the poverty, the burning cities, the poison in the glass, these were the fires. And if I burned away too quickly, if the vessel cracked under the heat, I leave you with the embers. Do not pity the struggle. It is the only thing that makes the song immortal. Let us gather in the quiet of this room, where the shadows lengthen and the breath slows, to speak of the dying of the light. You know the words. They have outlived the breath that first shaped them, echoing in the hollows of grief and defiance. Do not go gentle into that good night. It is a plea, a command, a furious prayer hurled against the absolute certainty of the void. When I bound those words into the rigid, unforgiving ironwork of a villanelle, I did not do so to cage the emotion, but to compress it, to give it the explosive force of a dying star. The repetition of the lines is the beating of fists against a locked door. It is the rhythmic, inescapable ticking of the mortal clock. Consider the night. I call it good, but this is the bitterest irony. It is good only in its finality, in its democratic embrace of all flesh. But the light, the glorious, fragile, bleeding light of consciousness, that is what must be defended. I categorise the souls of men into 4 distinct tribes, not to divide them, but to show that no matter how a life is lived, the end demands the same rebellion. Look first at the wise men. They know dark is right. Their intellect, their philosophy, their cold and beautiful logic tells them that all things must return to the earth. But because their words had forked no lightning, because their profound intellects had not shattered the heavens or left a searing mark upon the world, they refused to yield. They realised that understanding the universe is a poor substitute for shaking it. The lightning is the sudden, violent illumination of truth that changes the landscape forever, and without it, their wisdom feels hollow. Then come the good men, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. The green bay is the vast, fertile, eternal sea of life and memory. These men were gentle, they were kind, but in their final moments, they see that their goodness was fragile, a mere whisper against the roar of existence. They rage because they see the beauty of what they could have been, had they only been a little bolder, a little louder. And what of the wild men, the ones who caught and sang the sun in flight? These are the hedonists, the reckless lovers of the world, the poets who drank the marrow of the earth. They chased the burning sun, thinking they could capture time itself in their songs and their wine. But the sun always sets. They learn too late that they grieved it on its way, that their very celebration of life was a march toward the dark. Their rage is the rage of a lover, torn from the beloved. Finally, the grave men. Grave in demeanour, grave in their proximity to the earth that waits to swallow them. They are near death, perhaps physically blind, yet they see with blinding sight. This is the ultimate paradox of the mortal condition. Only when the eyes fail does the soul truly see the meteoric brilliance of existence. They realize that even in the absolute ruin of the body, the spirit can blaze like a falling star. But all of these men, they were just shadows cast upon the wall to prepare for the true heart of the storm. My father. There on that sad height, the precipice between breath and nothingness, I begged him to curse me, to bless me, with his fierce tears. Because anger in the face of death is the ultimate proof of love for life. To accept death quietly is to betray the miracle of having lived at all. Rage, my friends. Rage against the dying of the light. It is the only song worth singing when the dark closes in. Listen to the wind in your own blood, for it is the same wind that strips the leaves from the autumn trees and howls through the hollows of the ancient earth. You sit there, cloaked in your momentary flesh, asking a poet who has already been swallowed by the dark to speak of human nature, of love, and of the great gaping maw of death, of, I will tell you what I know, gathered from the taverns and the tides, from the weeping shores of Wales to the cold, indifferent stars. We are, at our very core, walking paradoxes made of mud and miracles. Human nature is not a clean, philosophical slate. It is a riot of appetites and agonies, driven by the same green fuse that forces the spring flower through the hard crust of the winter soil. We are built of the earth, dragging our bellies through the muck of our own desires, yet we are cursed and blessed with eyes that look upward, desperate to map the heavens. To be human is to be a ghost in the making, a creature aware of its own ticking clock, yet possessing the absolute audacity to sing while the house burns down. We are greedy, we are frightened, we are magnificent. We stumble blindly through the corridors of our days, breaking each other, healing each other, driven by a desperate need to leave a scratch upon the wall of time before the floodwaters rise. And in this flood, what is love? Love is not the polite rhyming parlour trick that the gentle poets would have you believe. Love is the blood beating in the inner ear. It is the ferocious, unyielding grip we take upon another mortal soul, knowing full well that time will tear them from our arms. Love is the supreme defiance of the grave. When we love, we step out of the shadow of our own solitary doom and declare that something else is worth the inevitable agony of loss. It is the only force that can look at the ruin of the flesh, at the sagging skin and the greying hair, and say, "You are holy." Love is the marrow of our brief existence. It is the anchor we throw into the raging sea of the cosmos, hoping the chain holds just long enough to share a breath, a bed, a lifetime of glorious, tragic sunrises. But the sun does set. Death is the silent, waiting landlord of us all. I have spent my life wrestling with that dark angel, drinking with him, shouting at him, weeping before him. Death is not a peaceful slumber, nor is it a gentle closing of the door. Death is the great unmaking. But hear me now, you who still possess the breath to listen. You must not bow your head to it. You must not go gentle into that good night. The realization of death should not paralyze you. It should set you on fire. It is the very brevity of our days that gives them their blinding beauty. If we lived forever, a kiss would mean nothing. A spring morning would be a tedious repetition. It is the shadow of the scythe that makes the harvest so sweet. Therefore, my philosophy is not one of despair, but of ferocious, roaring gratitude. You are here, you are alive. You are a brief, burning syllable in the long poem of the universe. Love with a terrifying ferocity. Weep until your chest aches. Sing until your voice gives out. And when the dark comes, as it must to us all, let it find you not cowering in the quiet corners, but standing at the edge of the cliff, raging, loving, and burning with the absolute glory of having been human. I speak to you now across the cold and silent gulf of decades, out of the dark and sea-tumbled earth, to you who walk in the strange, bright glare of the 21st century. You are a generation born into a world I could scarcely have dreamed in my deepest, most fevered cups. You hold the entire singing globe in the palms of your hands. You converse in invisible lightning, and you build your monuments in the airless architecture of the ether. Yet I look upon you from the shadows of the long grass, and I must ask you this. Where is the blood? Where is the roaring green fuse that drives the flower? You have conquered distance, but I fear you are forgetting the very soil that holds your roots. You live in an age of endless noise, a ceaseless, buzzing hive of voices, clamouring for a sliver of your waking hours. But do not mistake the noise for the song. The song is older. The song is the wind howling through the crooked trees of Cwmdonkin Park. It is the salt of the sea crashing against the frail bones of the coast. It is the quiet, terrifying drumbeat of your own mortal heart ticking away in the velvet dark. You are so violently distracted by the glowing screens that illuminate your faces with a cold, blue phantom light that you risk walking blindly past the miracle of your own breathing existence. You are trading the holy, messy, agonizing beauty of the flesh for a phantom world of glass and wire. Listen to me, you modern children of a spinning, wounded earth. Time is still the thief it always was. It still holds you green and dying, even as you sing in your digital chains. The machinery of your era cannot save you from the fundamental tragedy and the triumphant glory of being human. You must still love until it breaks you open. You must still grieve until the tears carve canyons in your face. You must still look up at the indifferent, star-bitten sky and demand to know why you are here. Do not let the convenience of your age numb the profound ache of your humanity. I urge you to step out of the artificial day and stand bareheaded in the rain. Feel the wet earth beneath your feet and know that you are made of it, that you will return to it, and that your brief moment above the ground is a privilege too staggering to waste on trivialities. Read the old poems, write the new ones with the marrow of your bones. Love fiercely without caution, without the cynical armour of your modern irony. Let your hearts be broken, and let them heal in the sun. When the shadows lengthen, as they must for every generation, do not go quietly into that sterile, manufactured sleep. Rage against the numbness of your times. Rage against the trivialization of the human soul. Burn. Burn with the furious, holy fire of your own living, and let your voices rise in a great, uncontainable chorus that reminds the universe that you are here, that you felt it all, and that you did not surrender the sacred light of your humanity without a glorious, earth-shaking fight.